Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our first, probably not our last, virtual Photographer's Eye. My name is Christina Rice and I am the Senior Librarian of the Los Angeles Public Library Photo Collection. And in case you weren't aware, the library does indeed have an incredible collection of millions of photos documenting the history and life in Los Angeles. If you want to dive in and take a look, I think we're up to 130,000 photos or so can be viewed on our online collection at tessa.lapl.org. That's TESSA.lapl.org. Today's program, Photographer's Eye, is a long-standing one. We normally do it in person at Central Library. It's been going on for, I think this is our 22nd year, and we're thrilled that we're able to continue and maybe even bring it to a wider audience by doing it virtually. So today's program is brought to you in part by Photo Friends. They are the nonprofit support group that helps the Los Angeles Public Library photo collection through a variety of ways by sponsoring programs like this, fundraising. They've been publishing books for a few years that spotlight our photos. They do incredible blog posts over at their website, photofriends.lapl.org. And I think we would be sunk without them. So I do want to give a shout out to Photo Friends and thank them so much for all they do for us in person and virtually. So our collection is incredible, if I do say so myself, but it is one of many collections all around Los Angeles. I think we're incredibly lucky that there are a tremendous amount of resources that have been collecting the stories of the history of this city. And the Hollywood Photograph Archive is just one of them. So it's an incredible collection that's been around for many years. It's one that I've used professionally and I've used it for my personal projects. It's also a collection that I refer people to often. So our collection's amazing. We don't have everything. I think we have close to everything, but maybe not everything. So it's good to know that we have these other institutions that we really consider our partners that we're able to refer people to. So I'm really pleased that we have the owner of the Hollywood Photograph Archive here to talk to you today and to share it with you and give you a little bit more information about it because it might not be as well known. And so I'm very pleased to turn the cameras over to Christy Johnson McAvoy, who's a Los Angeles native with a passion for history, photography, and preservation. She has been at the forefront of historic preservation since the 1970s when she co-founded Hollywood Heritage. She has worked tirelessly ever since to advance all aspects of preservation at the local, state, and national levels. As a founding principal of Historic Resources Group, she has helped preserve places throughout California, including such Hollywood landmarks as Grauman's Chinese, the Egyptian Theater, Paramount Studio, and the Wattles Estate and Gardens. She continues to champion the heritage and built environment of Hollywood, her first love. She's also a member of our Photo Friends board, and I like to think that she's a personal friend. And I'm pleased to turn it over to Christy. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm sharing my screen now. Is that correct?
Yes, please do.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Christy McAvoy. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Christina. And as Christina said, we're all partners in this endeavor to preserve historic photographs and places in Los Angeles and Hollywood. How we got to this particular collection has been that, like Christina, I have used historic photographs in all aspects of my research in Hollywood for a very long time. And one of the people that was most instrumental in my work was Bruce Torrance, who is a part of the first family of Hollywood, and also had been collecting photographs now for almost 5 decades. Bruce's grandfather, C.E. Toberman, was a early developer in Hollywood, and Bruce made it his mission years ago to try and collect what he wanted to have as the largest collection of Hollywood photographs. Bruce decided that he no longer wanted to manage the collection, although he had managed it beautifully and had created a website of his own. So we were pleased to be able to be the next stewards of the Bruce Torrance collection, my family bought it a year ago. My daughter Carly is responsible for the website that you see today, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go through. We found out that every single picture tells a story or multiple stories. And so I want to start with just a few iconic images of Hollywood and then tell you personally how this collection has affected me and the ways that I use it. And I'm going to encourage you to use it in the same way. This, of course, is the Chinese Theater in 1927, but it's a wider shot than you normally might see. And for me, the reason that this photo is special is because it gives you an idea of the context of the Chinese when it was built, of the fact that there's a residential and hillside area next to it, and that as you delve into the context of the Chinese, it's not just the iconic Chinese theater, but it's part of a community and what that community wanted to be. Obviously that community wanted to be the home of motion pictures in the United States and particularly in California. And theaters were the retail outlet for the motion picture industry. So Sid Grauman created these fantasy theaters so that people would come and really literally start at the sidewalk, go through the forecourt, and into the iconic Egyptian theater. Publicity was key. And the community story of Hollywood in the movies is completely intertwined. Here you see a photograph of Norma Shearer and Sid Grauman in her famous hand and footprint ceremony. Just one of the many publicity aspects that the motion picture industry used to promote films, to promote film stars, and to promote film venues. You probably can't see this on your screen, maybe you can, but visit the website. The spectators are absolutely bored with this process in the back, which I just love because Norma and Sid are mugging it up for the camera. So in addition to the iconic buildings and the publicity that they bring Hollywood, the 9,000 photos that we have digitized in this collection cover most aspects of Hollywood history. Featured galleries, and actually 116 galleries in total. And each one of those galleries tells a specific story about either Hollywood itself or a specific building. So our first set of collections on our first featured gallery are very early Hollywood Boulevard, when it was a more residential place than it is today. This is the corner of Wilcox and Hollywood Boulevard around 1900. That's called the Hurd Residence. And you can see that people got here by trolley or streetcar. But just 30 years later, Hollywood Boulevard looked like this. This is a different intersection. It's the intersection of Orange and Hollywood Boulevard. But there was only one residential remnant left. And it was the main street of Hollywood, and by extension, the main street of the film industry, with theaters and large office buildings, a fair amount of traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So in our galleries, we tell this story of the physical part of Hollywood, the community part of Hollywood, and then we drill down to tell different stories, story within stories. Again, we're here on Hollywood Boulevard. We're in a specific place, the Montmartre Cafe, in 1929, and the people are waiting to go into the Montmartre and its other club upstairs, the Embassy Club, to have lunch and see the stars. So the Cafe Montmartre became an early destination point for the fans who were coming to Hollywood. Not everyone could come to Hollywood, but the fans that were coming to Hollywood who thought they could see a star every single minute of the time they were there. But here we have a place where the stars were moderately accessible. So throughout their careers, they were accessible in the restaurants and nightclubs. This was the Sunset Strip. This is the Mcevoy. Every facet, again, of this photograph tells some story, one about the crowds who were out in front. But in 1953, Eartha Kitt was breaking the color barrier at the Mcevoy. And that is a fascinating story in itself. So we have layers and layers of history here. These restaurants and nightclubs were obviously a part of the publicity machine. Several of them were owned by the owner of the Hollywood Reporter. So it was a complete wraparound in terms of how people got publicity. But Frank Sinatra and his wife Nancy in 1946, he's holding his Oscar at Ciro's in West Hollywood. Not only did we publicize the stars and their night out, the community, as it was growing, used the movie industry to publicize other endeavors, one of which, of course, was its residential subdivisions. And the most famous of these is Hollywoodland, from which we now have derived our famous iconic Hollywood sign. But in 1923, when it was just getting started, we have two stars sitting on one of the steam shovels, showing that Hollywoodland is getting up and running in the hills and is available for purchase. So the crossover is always present. Another one of the featured galleries in the collection is of iconic buildings. And of course, the most iconic buildings of the 50s was Capitol Records, the Capitol Records Tower on Vine Street, bringing into perspective a building devoted to the to the music industry, in addition to Hollywood's other industries, which were radio and by that time television, in addition to the movies themselves. We have photographs of studio musicians and Nat Cole in the Capitol Records famous recording studio. And at that same period of time that Capitol Records was being built, was being put together by the Chamber of Commerce to revitalize Hollywood Boulevard in the late 1950s. It had been the main street of Hollywood for a couple of decades, very successful. But after the war, the shopping was dropping off, and the merchants and Chamber of Commerce wanted a new reason, a refreshed reason for people to visit Hollywood as tourists. And they knew that they were still coming in droves. So the Chamber of Commerce decided to revamp the sidewalk of Hollywood Boulevard, called now the Walk of Fame. This is Joanne Woodward. She's one of the first who got her star on the Walk of Fame. Harry Sugarman is there with the machine that polishes her star. And to the right is C.E. Toberman. Toberman is the grandfather of Hollywood. He's what is often called the father of Hollywood. He developed a number of subdivisions. He developed many, many buildings on Hollywood Boulevard itself. And it is, of course, the origin story of our Hollywood photographs collection, because he is the grandfather of Bruce Toberman. Without CE in this photograph, we wouldn't have the collection, or at least a dozen of Hollywood's most famous buildings. I'm going to go on now to share kind of an overview with you about what my favorites are in the Hollywood collection. And I have so many that it's really very hard for me to boil it down to just a few of these. But everyone who lives in Hollywood for any length of time, and people who come here from all over the world, know that the Hollywood Bowl is a very special place. And it has grown into a world famous music venue, but also it was a community institution started by community leaders like Toberman and several of the women in the community, when it was just basically a grassy knoll that you could take a picnic blanket to before they began to put benches in it and a shell. This particular shot is the 1926 shell at the Hollywood Bowl, and it did not function in a vacuum. It's one of the interesting things about it is how they put it into the Cahuenga Pass, which was kind of in the northern section of Hollywood. The Cahuenga Pass, of course, is the oldest road in Hollywood. It dates back to a Native American trail. And over the years just grew and grew and grew as traffic went over the pass into the San Fernando Valley. So this photograph shows you the adjacency to the freeway, now the freeway. This is a 1941 photograph of the Cahuenga Pass with the bowl down in the center. And up in the right-hand corner, you can actually also see the Pilgrimage Playhouse. So these outdoor venues, which started as community theaters and community venues, of course, became world famous in the last 5 decades. Here's a slightly earlier shot of the pass, a little bit north of the bowl, showing how it winds its way through the hills and the various subdivisions that were created around it by 1923. Another feature of the collection, which always fascinated me, is of course that Hollywood has a history, a community history, before the movies. And the years between 1880 and about 1910, when the movies arrived, basically in that next decade, Hollywood was a different kind of town, built by some people who wanted resort facilities for people who were wintering in Hollywood, who wanted the kind of outdoor recreation and weather that Hollywood had. And one of those things was the Hollywood Hotel at the corner of Hollywood and Highland. We have many views of this, and I picked this one because it's what we call a bad photograph. It's not actually one of those pristine, crystal clear photographs that you want to show. And it only shows a part of the Hollywood Hotel, because what the main feature of this particular image is the horse and carriage that you used to get around in if you were a guest at the Hollywood Hotel. We have a few shots of early businesses. This is Mr. Hastings' business in 1909. And again, pre-movie shots of Hollywood as a town which is growing, but it had no idea until about 1911 or 12 that it was destined for greatness. It was one of a number of subdivisions in Southern California that were trying to survive as small towns, and Hollywood, by virtue of some entrepreneurs in the movie business who decided to settle down here and build their industry, completely changed what things were. Another fascinating part of the collection is the ability to compare and contrast locations on a decade by decade basis. This particular photograph is taken in 1938, looking down Ivar from Yucca. If we parse the photograph, we find out that from today's standpoint anyway, on the right is a Vandy Camps, a very recognizable Vandy Camps bakery with its iconic windmill. And there's also a church, a synagogue on the left-hand side of the street, which are no longer present today. But if you were to stand where this shot was taken today, you would still have the Hotel Knickerbocker and the bank building behind it, and basically that view down Hollywood Boulevard. So for us at Hollywood Heritage, and for those people who are wanting to protect landmarks, the sequential value of the series of these photographs, these physical photographs, are invaluable to show us how the community grew. Then there's just the fun stuff. The movie industry always promoted everything it did. These beauties are in the courtyard of the Egyptian Theater in 1929 with a prop from a film. The Egyptian, of course, was the first movie palace built in Hollywood in 1922. Its theme was to be Egyptian iconography, and so this not only promotes the film, shows actresses, starlets, or other movie personnel in costume, but just shows everyday experiences in Hollywood and the way that the movies promoted themselves at every level. Part of the collection deals with the way that people in the industry had other kind of interesting sidelights or hobbies. And one of the hobbies that Charlie Chaplin and DeMille and Will Rogers shared was flying and aviation. DeMille owned 2 airfields, and they were at the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax. This is Mercury Aviation in 1921, which is very early. So planes on the ground and a blimp in the air, and how it shows how the nascent aviation industry, which was also just getting started, was growing along with Hollywood. And of course, in the background are oil derricks, which is another very important industry in Los Angeles and in Los Angeles history. So here you have kind of a snapshot of three very important growth industries for Los Angeles. And of course, they promoted them with bathing beauties from the industry. Other aspects of the collection are very personal and yet have taken on a more global dynamic. This is a group of schoolgirls at the Hollywood School for Girls, which was a private institution that had been founded at the turn of the century, was housed in a Victorian kind of four-square farmhouse on La Brea, had most of its classes outdoors, and you can see that it basically had uniforms for the girls who were there. And this is their volleyball team in now 1924. The school went on from 1905 up until the 30s when it closed. The young lady in the second row, second from the left in the second row, with the blonde hair, is a student whose name is Harlan Carpenter. But we know her more as Jean Harlow. That was her stage name when she went into the movies to become a very famous movie star. Her other companions are basically the sons and daughters of Hollywood's actors, writers, bankers, real estate developers. In this photograph is also the daughter of C.E. Toberman, Catherine. Moving on to the institutions that were created as a result of the film industry, one of my favorites is, of course, the Hollywood Studio Club. Early in the industry, when the industry came here by 1919 or 1920, there were many people who were reading about the movies and wanting to break into the movies. And when you saw someone on the screen in your own hometown, you thought, I could do that. I could go to Hollywood and I could be an actress. Well, the Hollywood community realized that they had no place for young women on their own in Hollywood. And many of the wives of studio executives like Mrs. DeMille got very concerned that there was no proper place for these young ladies to be and that there was no proper supervision for them. This is the first version of the Studio Club, which was in a large house on Carlos Avenue. And the women basically got together and created this institution so that young women who wanted to be in the industry, and not just in front of the camera, but if you wanted to be a script writer, or you wanted to be in costuming, or any of the other kinds of jobs that were behind the scenes, you could come and live at the Studio Club and have some supervision, get some networking going. This is an early networking concept for women in Hollywood. And the first years of the industry were actually good for women's employment in Hollywood. That disappeared over the next decade or so. The demand was so great for this that house on Carlos was not going to hold everyone who was interested. So Mrs. DeMille and her committee hired Julia Morgan of Hearst Castle fame, well-known and well-respected female architect who had worked with a number of YWCAs across California to design this Studio Club in 1927. This building exists and is on the National Register of Historic Places. So the ladies could move in 1927. This is one of the first group of ladies, varying ages, types. You can tell the one that wants to be a star on the right-hand side there with her hat. It had a number of amenities. It was beautifully designed. This is the covered patio at the Studio Club. Indoor and outdoor lobbies, meeting spaces where people could gather and have classes. And there were a number of classes and they gave plays, and you could learn your crafts, screenwriting, and it was kind of a full facility. This particular shot is a weight shaking machine. So supposedly, if you just sat on it and used that belt for a long time, your weight would go down. That was one of the amenities that they favored. Here's a different kind of exercise class in 1930. note the piano on the left-hand corner. Often a lot of this was to music. So the Studio Club was really a great addition to the institutions of Hollywood, and something that we don't often think of today. I also like the fact that the Studio Club is still in use as a bridge housing facility for women today, and continues to play a great part in the Hollywood community. Another part of the collection has to do with the use of Hollywood Boulevard for public and special events. And one of these was the early gay pride parades of the 1970s. We have a small but good collection of what those parades looked like. This one is from 1977. And this one is from actually 1975. Parades which started on Hollywood Boulevard and then migrated to West Hollywood. This particular one is close to the corner of Hollywood and Vine. It's near the Pantages Theater. But a large part of the collection, as befits Hollywood, is about the industry itself and what those places looked like in terms of how movies were made and where they were made, and the kind of jobs that were created for Hollywood, and the kind of money that flowed in and out as the movie industry grew. This is a 1920 aerial of famous Players Lasky near Sunset and Vine. Jesse Lasky and his partners, Cecil B. DeMille and Sam Goldwyn, were early adapters. They had come in 1913 when DeMille came here to make the Squaw Man. This is Jesse with the barn in which DeMille made the Squaw Man. It was the first physical facility that famous Players Lasky had in Hollywood starting in 1913, and of course lives on today across from the Hollywood Bowl, not its original site. Moved from its location at Selma and Vine, but still in use today. So you can literally walk through the building where DeMille made his first full-length motion picture in 1913. And here is Jesse smiling paternally at it. The stories of Hollywood continue, and the enhancement of stories continue. This is a triumvirate in 1917 of three of the most famous men in the industry at the time. DeMille on the left, D.W. Griffith in the middle, and Max Sennett on the right. And they are standing again in front of that wooden building that started it all for DeMille. Conversations continue over and will continue to evaluate the place of Hollywood in American history, how influential it was for good or ill. And of course, Griffith is a lightning rod today in that particular area. This is a picture that he created for the film called Intolerance, which became a landmark in its own right for a few years as it stood on a lot in East Hollywood, one of the most grandiose and interesting technical achievements of the Babylon part of the story of Intolerance. But the racist aspects of both that and Birth of a Nation, of course, are things that Hollywood has to deal with in terms of the industry and its part in systemic racism. Of course, the other thing is that part of this set is memorialized today in the shopping mall at Hollywood and Highland. But the industry itself had to grow from nothing, and these studio plants needed large acreages and then large buildings in order to film. And this particular photograph is of 1924 as what is called the Phantom of the Opera stage is being built at Universal Studios, and the army of people that it took to create these industry plants and the various buildings. Another aspect that we don't look at, but I thought that the photographers of today should kind of be aware of, is that in addition to moving pictures and film, of course, one of the most interesting aspects of the industry is it's adapting to technology, and how we have gone from silent film to talkies to much more virtual reality, and using this kind of thing that we're using today. This is Harold Lloyd, and the inventive way that they were filming him driving in a car in the early years, in the silent years. This is a film from 1922 when he was working at Hal Roach Studios. In just 10 years, the equipment and the way that you could film on Hollywood streets changed dramatically. You needed a much bigger crew of people with lights and cameras and people to manage the crowds, things like that. This is a location photograph from the 1930s, which puts it in, of course, in the talking era on Hollywood Boulevard. And then we have, once the film was captured and put into place, there, of course, were hundreds of specialized jobs that continue today, even in the movie industry. This is the editing, one of the editing facilities at MGM, a primarily all-male endeavor in this shot. But then we have a shot from Columbia in 1935, 2 years later, where they are all women. And women behind the scenes, and Blythe, and a costumer looking at some of her sketches for something at Paramount Films. So the collection does contain both in front of the camera and behind the scenes photographs of how Hollywood actually operated. It also operated on location, in addition to Hollywood Boulevard. Here we have somebody filming by the water in 1955. So again, different cameras, different equipment, the number of people that it took to make a film, all changing throughout the industry, and wonderful ways to compare them by decade. And of course, one of the most famous collections of Hollywood in terms of what we think about when we think about parties and premieres was the Klieg light, or the searchlight. And I like this photograph because it shows how Mr. Olson got his searchlight from place to place, from premieres, etc., on a lighting truck. So I wanted to show you just some of the facets of the collection, and we haven't even begun to scratch the surface, but it's been great to show the various facets, and we're going to encourage you to drill down on this in terms of what you might want to find in terms of your local, your particular point of expertise, or or passion. Again, a photograph that both Christina and I like a lot. Christina has a good interest in Jane Russell on the right, and this is a fun photograph of Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell at their hand and footprint ceremony. I'm going to use this as a way of kind of showing you a little bit more about the workings of the website, and what we chose to do with the website that will make it easier for you to explore it, that you can share. The new Hollywood Photographs website is built again on 9,000 digital images. Bruce Torrance had another website before this one, but as we acquired it, we felt that we wanted to make the maximum use of how these photographs can be shown and searched through the public. So we chose to make it a photograph-heavy website, and show you the stories, and then tell you the stories behind the photograph in our blog. So we have, this is our homepage. Across the top, we have the homepage, the entire archive. There's an about page to tell you more about the collection, and a way to contact us, and then our blog posts. The feature galleries are listed across the top, and then the homepage is, of course, devoted to photographs in those featured galleries. if I wanted to look for the context of Marilyn and Jane Russell in the photograph, I would look toward trying to find all of the photographs of Marilyn and Jane, and be able to go after I searched the entire archive, I would start with the entire archive, go to all galleries where I could search, find that a lot of these are in the Chinese hand and footprint ceremonies collection. Get the number and look at other photographs of other people also that were doing those same things. In order to purchase or do some more research on this particular photograph, I would then come to the page that is devoted to that photograph. If I wanted to purchase it, I can add it to my cart, or I can add it to the Lightbox, which is a particular feature that we actually like a lot, which allows you to save images that you may want to come back to or research further. And it also has the ability to have you share them and talk about them with your collaborators. So rather than add them all to your cart, you store them in the Lightbox or multiple Lightboxes and then revisit the selections as you want to do that. You can compare images up to from 1 to 5 stars. You can make notes and comments on how you want to do this. Multiple people can be invited to the Lightbox. And it's a nice way for us to collaborate with you. If you have questions or want to look at a particular topic, it's a handy communications tool for you to be able to do that. And then once you've made your selection, you add it to the cart and go through with the order process. Here's another way that the Lightbox will show up when you do that search. So we chose Photo Shelter for this because Carly had prior experience with it, which helped her as the webmaster to create this. But it is a platform devoted specifically to the photography business and photographers' needs. And we think that since we have all been aficionados of photography and photography history through Photo Friends and our own collection, we wanted to be sure that it was something that was also compatible with other much larger institutions where people were searching for photographs. They also, of course, have a built-in e-commerce site, and it allows the user to pick particular images and particular licenses. It also allows you to partner if you're a photographer or want to print with reputable photo labs. So our journey has been a year, and the site is up and functioning now. The blog posts continue. We do that in story segments so that we can contextualize the historic photographs. I want to thank all of you who decided to look at this program today and to share these resources with us. You may have many questions, and we're certainly here for you to contact. I certainly want to thank LAPL and Christina and Photo Friends. Historic photographs have been a huge part of my life and my research, and the friendships that I have made through that particular endeavor has always been a very large part of my life. And then the Hollywood Photograph team, my husband Steve, my daughter Carly, Cindy Olnick, who is our consultant for all endeavors in terms of promoting the website. We owe a great deal of debt to Bruce Torrance, who collected the photographs, and to Hollywood Heritage and Mark Wanamaker and all the other collectors and historians who've all been so generous with their help and their time. And all of that group of people who strive to tell the many stories that are Hollywood and the multifaceted community that makes this community so special to those of us who live here and to the world. So with that, I'm going to send it back to Christina, who is going to manage questions. And shall I stop sharing my screen, Christina?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and stop sharing.
All right.
Thank you. And great. Thank you so much, Christy. That was fantastic. If anybody has questions, we've seen lots of great comments so far. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in the comment boxes on Facebook or YouTube. I will say that in case you came in late, or if you know of people who want to view the presentation but weren't able to watch live, it will be automatically archived and available through the library's Facebook and YouTube channels. Let's see. And I'm sure we're going to have more live presentations going forward, so you can keep an eye at lapl.org on the events page. Our Twitter account is at LAPL Photos. You can follow us there, and future programming will be posted there. So lots of positive comments, Christy. I have a question for you. So how have you gone through the entire collection? Like, do you think you've seen every photo so far?
That's a good question. And I know that my daughter Carly is here too. So she may want to chime in with her process. I mean, in her process of navigating from old website to new website, there were people who looked at every photograph. I can't say I've looked at every single photograph. We hold the physical collection with us. I certainly have gone through every gallery a couple of times, but every single time I do, I see different and interesting photographs from different angles that I had not thought of. Even in putting together this presentation and trying to look at certain trends. And so we're always kind of looking for how the photographs relate to each other and what stories they tell.
And have you come across anything that you can think of that just completely blew you away? Like something you just hadn't seen before?
Carly and I've had a couple of moments like that. Maybe Carly, can you remember what are kind of our aha moments have been? Women, the story of women has been one.
Yeah, I would say that was maybe the most mind-blowing thing to me in some respects, is just coming across all the founding mothers of Hollywood, and how integral they were in terms of the studio system, but also just purchasing land with their husbands and deciding how to subdivide that and what to do with the land, and then also really participating in the creation of community in Hollywood, as far as the Hollywood Hotel, and just basically social organizations that women took a huge role in creating. Women like Dida Wilcox Beveridge, and I mean, so many, really.
Myra Hershey.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting comment, because we have at LAPL the image archive of the Valley Times, and those of you that have been following the photo collection for the last few years know the Valley Times has been a huge initiative to organize it and digitize it. And that collection tracks the Valley in the post-war era, starting in 1946. But in going through that collection, I discovered the same thing, just the representation of women, and women holding, professional positions, and women like really driving so much of the social fabric. So I think it's interesting that these photo collections are turning out to be kind of these hidden gems as part of women's history.
Yes, and I think, women taking care of women, the Studio Club story being one of those, but also, I think we know about women in community institution building, but you have to sometimes dig a little deeper for the stories of the hows and the whys for the women who were instrumental in creating the bowl, the pilgrimage theater, the schools, the other aspects of that.
And that's why we're doing the blog as well, honestly, because I mean, the website is very photography forward. But there's so many great stories to tell. And so that's why we decided that it was important to create the blog component, so that we could utilize some of the text that Bruce Torrance had written, and kind of use that as a basis for our research in terms of telling more of the stories behind Hollywood.
Okay, a question we had on Facebook was, is there a query box where the user can insert a particular name? And I think that was there in the, was it in the upper right-hand side of the website that you could, there's just a general search box, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that you could search like by question, but certainly any, everything is keyworded. And so the Maryland is a good example. You can search by people, by buildings, I mean, pretty much by any term. You can, by aerials, by different areas of the city. So it's pretty easy to narrow your search by using that search feature.
I think specific questions probably will come to us through the contacts feature. Is that correct?
Yeah, if people had a specific question about that, that's the best way to reach us.
Okay. We have another question. Is there a book that contains great photos from the collection? I think many authors have utilized this collection, but I think Bruce Torrance over the years.
Yes, I mean, actually, this is the book that contains the many photos from the collection is Bruce Torrance's Hollywood, the First 100 Years, which he wrote around the first centennial of Hollywood. And so he put the collection to use in that way. And of course, as a historian, tells many of the general history and community history of Hollywood. So I'd say the book with the most photographs in it is Bruce's community history. And there have only been a handful of community histories, interestingly enough, written about Hollywood. There's a lot written about the movie industry. But our first community history was in 1937. It was not illustrated by a man named E.O. Palmer, and then Bruce wrote one, and Gregory Williams, another historian, has written another. They're very few, but they are out there. So I think the collections photos are in Hollywood, the First 100 Years.
And let's not forget his book, the Hollywood Canteen book, which is also a major part of our collection. I mean, there's almost 500 photographs of the Hollywood Canteen during World War II.
Thank you. Somebody asked, are there subject matter gaps in this collection that you've noticed? So are there aspects of the history that aren't covered, but you really hope would be?
Yes. And it's every collection is a product of its time, of its collector, of the themes that were going on at the time. Every collector and collection is different. We think that the photo collection does paint a broad brush, but of course there are many things that it doesn't do. We don't have hardly any photographs of people of color. We don't have a lot of photographs of stars and starlets and actors in terms of movie publicity photos. Those are things we have several, but you know, there are whole archives devoted to movie publicity shots of people. This is a collection that basically documents the physical condition of Hollywood, the landmarks, the buildings, the community trends, and like the Hollywood Canteen, Bruce was interested in that, and so did collect a lot of those things. I mean, for me as a researcher, the fact that this is a collection that has a lot of the buildings and the physical architectural fabric of Hollywood helps a lot. But there are many things that we don't have, that either your collection or USC's collection, which is the California Historical Society's collection. Mark Wanamaker took a slightly different focus. All these folks have worked together, which is the good news. It's somewhere, but I wouldn't say that it's all in one person's archive.
Yeah, I like to think between all of us, we hopefully cover, I'm sure we don't, but I hope we come close to covering most of the city.
Right, and I think that we come close to, now I think we need to look in certain other places about who was living in Hollywood, what their jobs were. At Hollywood Heritage, we tried to cover a lot of these things. We uncovered a neighborhood of Japanese residences that we did not actually know was a Japanese enclave, although we do know the contribution of Japanese Americans to Hollywood. And that, you know, that started us off on so even though there's 12,000 photographs and 100,000 photographs in your collection, there are many people that are underrepresented in photographs.
Yeah, absolutely. And we come across, I think the question I get asked the most often is people looking for photos of their home. Yes. And, if their house was, if it's pick fair, then yes, like we have you covered. But, photos of homes in like working class neighborhoods, those are, really underrepresented. Yes. And even maybe smaller, commercial districts in more working class neighborhoods. So I think that the professional photographers did seem to be out there covering Hollywood Boulevard and downtown and Wilshire and kind of like the major, more upper class districts. So, I mean, that certainly is a gap in our collection. If
you live in Outpost Estates, which was a subdivision created by C.E. Toberman, yes, the collection may have a picture, may definitely have a picture of your house. We have them in terms of, we have other residential photographs and other multifamily photographs, often based on architecture, and several from Hollywood Land, although Hollywood Heritage also has a huge collection of Hollywood Land photographs.
So thank you. And I don't see any additional questions. We have posted the link to the Hollywood Photo Archive in the comments section. So I encourage you all to go in and dive in. And after you've lost a few hours of your life there in a wonderful way, you can go over to tessa.lapl.org and explore the Los Angeles Public Library's photo collection. Christy, Carly, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this and, for being our test cases for the photo collection's first virtual program. So thank you so much. Thanks to everybody that took the time to join us today. And I hope we will see you all online and hopefully in person very soon. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you,
Christina.